it's not that hard. And at that point, now I say, okay, this is how I get the interest rate down. So here's my like gold nugget at the end of the show. So if you're still here, great. So then I say, okay.
Hey, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to worry about where the money was going to come from for your next deal? You know, how many of you have ever had this problem where you got a great deal and you're all excited, but then you turn around and you have no idea where the money's going to come from. You have no idea how you're going to close on the deal, how you're going to flip it. You call a bunch of realtors and you try to get them to list your property if it's vacant land, and they say, do you own it yet? And you say no. And then you're like, where do I get the money from? And the clock is ticking as you're coming to your closing date, and you don't have the funds to close this deal. You're hoping you can find somebody to assign the deal to, or to maybe double close. But wouldn't it be nice if you had already dug your well before you're thirsty, and you already had access to private money so you could close on your deal, and you could close on it in 15, 20, 30 days if it was a smoking hot deal, right? Then you actually own it. You turn around and you sell it through a realtor on the MLS or wherever you want to sell it. And then guess what? You can make a bunch more money because you can now list it without having a real estate license, because you actually own it, and you don't have to worry about all of the hassle and how it's illegal, immoral, and fattening to close deals if you don't have a license yet. You know what I'm saying? Wholesale deals, right? So on this episode today, we're going to be talking with a good friend of mine, Bill Allen from 7 Figure Flipping, on how to do all of this. He's going to break it down step by step. He's got a great program that I actually include for free in my Inner Circle program, which you can check it out right now at joemccall.com/cashflow, joemccall.com/cashflow. And what you're going to get when you go there is I put together this little special course on how to get cash flow from flipping vacant land. And within a couple months, you can make enough money to cover your mortgage payment without using any of your own money. Well, we're going to be talking about that on this show with Bill, but one of the things that you get as a bonus inside of my Inner Circle is a program that my guest today put together. It's a 30-day program on how to get all the private money you need for your deals, and it's completely free if you're a member or a student of the Inner Circle. Okay, just go to joemccall.com/cashflow. All right, with that being said, let's bring on Bill, my good friend for years. Bill, how are you, my man?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here on the show. We've known each other for a long time. I was friends with one of your mentors, Justin Williams. I haven't talked to him in years and years, but yeah. You were a successful student of his, I believe. And you were in the military, and I'm going to ask you your story in a minute here, because it's really cool what you do. And then you started flipping a bunch of deals, started making a bunch of money, and you bought his company, and you've taken it to a whole nother level, and you're doing some awesome things over at 7 Figure Flipping. But let's go back to the early days real quick. Tell us, what were you doing before you got started in real estate?
So I was flying for the Navy. So I was a full-time Navy pilot. I just retired last year. So I did 20 years in the Navy, 15 years active duty. I actually built my business while I was active duty. But if you really want to go back to what I was doing before I was doing houses, I was watching HGTV. So I mapped this out recently to try to figure out where this came from. And I realized for like years, I was watching these HGTV shows about flipping houses, just wondering, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, it sensationalized it. And without those shows, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now, actually. So They're kind of cringy now, obviously, doing the business. But that was kind of the catalyst to kind of get me going and start doing more and more research on it. So. Yeah.
Okay. So then you got into Justin Williams' program.
Yes. Well, before that, I was doing some things on my own. So the first thing I did was I bought a house in Pensacola. I was a pilot there as a flight instructor, and I just ripped out the spare bathroom. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I just ripped it up, and I was like, I'll put this thing back together and make it nice. Bought the Home Depot 1, 2, 3 book, that big orange book, if you remember that one. And just called my uncle was a contractor in Maryland. I called him up, asked him some questions, watched YouTube videos, put it back together, rented that house out. And then I flipped a couple on my own. But my plan was just buy a bunch of rentals. I bought a couple more rentals, and then I flipped one house a year for 2 years. And then I joined Justin's program. But I was very anti-spending money. I was incredibly cheap. I still am from time to time in many things. But I was saving about 60% of my salary at the time. And I knew I wanted to do more, and I was listening to a podcast just like this. and hearing somebody who's doing 150 deals a year, I was like, he's lying. Like, it's just not true. And ended up buying a $25,000 program. It's a much longer story, but I didn't even buy a book before that or go to an event. I never went to a conference ever. And I had a library card. I would wait like a month to get the book that I wanted because I didn't want to buy it. That's how cheap I was. Bought a $25,000 program. And that first year I ended up doing 67 deals. I flipped 12 houses and wholesaled 55. And then we did 135 the year after that, 187 after that, and kind of grew to about 200 a year for a while. So that was kind of my journey, going from kind of one flip a year to 67. And it was really just...
What year was that switch?
That was in 2015. So I did my first deal in 2013. I did my second in 2014. Probably bought a rental each one of those years too. And I had just gotten back I went to England for test pilot school, just got back from England, got engaged to be married. And I was like, she's not going to work. I need to make some more money. And so that's when I got deeper into real estate, flipped that first one, made half of my salary, $43,000 on that first flip. And that was life-changing for me.
So you're making a lot of money in real estate. Why didn't you quit your job? What was it? Why did you stay with your job?
I mean, I love my job. I got to fly. The military literally handed me an airplane every single day to fly with a student that did 7.5 Gs, went upside down, did aerobatics. Like, I don't know why you would want to leave that. And I was able to do it while I was doing that. It was a lot of work. The first year, I'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I would work in my office for about 2.5 hours until my son got up at 7. We had a newborn at the time when I was kind of ramping up the business in 2015. And then I would have breakfast with my family, go to work. I'd fly 10 or 12 hours a day, every single day. Wow. I'd come home. I'd play with my son, hang out with my wife, have dinner. And then when my son went to bed at 7. So she was like a sleep consultant and sleep trainer. So he went to bed at 7 and she would go to the couch and watch TV. I'd go in the office till about 10:30. I did that every day for a year. And so all weekends, like nonstop, pretty much my life was flying in real estate. That's it. And as much a little bit of family time, but I told my wife, I said, look, I'm going to be absent for a year, but I'm going to set us up for the rest of our lives. And I'll be there for everything. When our kids start to remember at like 4 or 5 years old, I'll be able to do anything. We'll be able to go anywhere. And that was kind of my commitment to her and the family. And now I can pretty much choose to do what I want to do. But and I love doing it. I said, I'm going to keep flying until I stop having fun. And then they put me on a desk at year 18 and a half. They took me out of the cockpit for the first time in 18 and a half years. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to suck it up and get to retirement. But I was doing probably $2.5 million a year in the real estate business before I left active duty, just because I didn't need to. And my son got sick. He's the real reason why I left active duty. My middle son needed heart surgery. He's had 5 open heart surgeries and 6 heart catheters. So when we were pregnant with him, that's when I was like, I don't want to get deployed. I need to be here. And that's when I left active duty. How's
he doing now, your son?
He's great. His name's James. He's incredible. He's a 7-year-old little crazy boy right now, but he's a special needs kid. He's got a chromosome anomaly. But he's just the most amazing kid on the planet. I love him. He's so everybody here, we call him like the mayor of Spring Hill, Tennessee. Everybody knows him. He hugs everyone at the restaurant. They know him somehow from school or after school programs and things like that. He's a really cool kid. Big heart.
And how many kids do you have?
I got 3, 9, 7, and 6, and all boys, all testosterone in my house, and it's pretty crazy. So
that's awesome. What was your favorite plane that you flew? Or one or two?
So I broke the speed of sound in a T-38. I really like the T-38. It's a twin engine trainer. It can roll 720 degrees per second. So 2 rolls in 1 second. And I was at test pilot school. I got to fly it before I went to England when I was in Patuxent River. And I was flying with one of the instructors there because I was a helicopter pilot in the fleet. So I was flew with him. And I was just like getting after it, doing all kinds of aerobatics. I just came back from a fixed wing tour as a fixed wing flight instructor in the T-34. And I was tearing it up, doing loops. I was doing split S's, aileron rolls. I was just rolling the thing. And he goes, all right, hey, you got to stop. I'm about to puke, man. And that was like I loved it. I got the instructor who flies the T-38 all the time. I'm having more fun than him and I'm making him sick. So that was a really cool plane to fly. I love that one. And then the helicopter, I really enjoyed flying the Apache. That was a really cool helicopter to fly. The Huey, I love flying the Huey. I could fly the Huey every day. I loved my 60 Sierra. That was my Chariot when I was in the fleet. So I pretty much I haven't met an airplane or a helicopter that I don't like flying. So.
Did you ever fly the fighter jets? I don't even know what they're called, but
no, I never got a chance to fly the F-14 or the F-18. No, I didn't get any of that. I never got a whole shot, like cat shot on the carrier. None of that stuff. I landed on the carrier a lot, but it was in my helicopter. So, closest to it was the T-38 that I got to fly.
That's still sweet. And
it was
the
fun.
The fastest you ever flown? Was it that?
Yeah, that was it. Probably like Mach 1.05. So as far as speed goes, it really just depends on the day. But I mean, that's upwards of probably 600 miles an hour, 700 miles an hour. So.
Oh my gosh. Here's the question I've always had with these pilots. When you're doing that crazy stuff, what happens if you pass out? Like, or you just kind of, for a second, what happens?
Yeah, you're screwed. Some of the new jets have a system that if you're incapacitated, it'll auto eject you. But yeah, we've had many accidents. I had a guy that I flew with in the helicopter. He passed away. They got in a crash. Him and another instructor. They were up doing we do these out of control flight trainings every 6 months, and him and the instructor they were still strapped into their plane when they crashed into the water. So
that's horrible. Couldn't they just develop something where it just levels you out and straightens you up and then gives you time?
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is starting to happen. But I mean, if you're in a spin or out of control flight, it's just it's possible. So that's a full 4-axis autopilot that also needs full range. So, I mean, much more detailed conversation, but on these autopilots, they only have small amounts of either electronic or digital response that you can get as far as what it can move. It can't move the whole flight control. It can only move a trim tab typically. So it's only making small adjustments, not like really big adjustments or large adjustments over time. It can do. Okay. So it's possible. I mean, I was a aeronautical engineer. I got a master's in aeronautical engineering. Being a test pilot, we go do all this stuff. But there's so many advancements that are coming. A lot of these, like there's a parachute in aircraft now. There are auto land features. So if the pilot does pass out, the passenger can hit an emergency button, and the airplane will land itself. It'll fly a full approach and land itself without doing anything or knowing how to fly. So there's a lot of safety features that are coming into play now.
By the way, guys, you should check out Bill's YouTube channel, because he has a lot of videos of him on there talking about flying. He's got what's the jet that you have now, the airplane you have now?
I have a TBM 850, a 2010 TBM 850. It's a gas turbine, 310 knots, 31,000 feet.
Which is fast.
Yeah.
Which is powerful, which is high. And that's awesome.
Yeah. It's fun. I do interviews in the cockpit of the airplane. One day, Joe will let me fly him around. So we'll see when that is.
I do not want to be that guy on the video throwing up on the video. You just interviewed some guy the other day who threw up all over your dash.
Yeah, it was at the end of the flight. He was on the ground, didn't tell me he was getting sick. I won't say who it is. I don't know if he wants me to share, but hopefully he allows me to make a few reels and YouTube shorts from the video.
Yeah. All right. So where can people find your YouTube channel, by the way?
Bill Allen. It's my name, Bill, Allen. It's at Bill Allen REI on YouTube.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about private money.
Yeah.
You've raised a lot of private money in the past for your deals. Talk about, how important has private money been to you in your real estate business?
Oh, it was game changing. In fact, I remember giving a presentation in like 2017 at a big event that we do about this. And I said, I thought it was like the mastermind. I think the biggest thing that I learned was to raise money and be able to talk about money. It allowed me to close any deal that I needed. If I couldn't wholesale a deal, I could close it myself. It gives you so many options, and you can move quickly. You have more confidence when you come in to negotiate a transaction. Just like you were talking about on the beginning of the show, like just being able to legitimately have $1 million in your back pocket all the time, or having the confidence that you can, it changes the game. It separates you from the other investors. It allows you to do a lot of different creative deal strategies and gives you options. It's huge. I've probably raised close to $50 million now in my single family and multifamily money raising. So a lot of that is recycled money. Like we would sell a deal and then use it again. But I mean, that's about 50 million put into transactions over the last 8 years. So
that's huge. And that's a lot of money.
yeah.
Now, let's talk about why private money is so important. And I'll throw this out there first, because there's a lot of this going on right now where it's illegal, immoral, and fattening to wholesale real estate, wholesale houses or land without your real estate license. You know, Illinois was the first kind of big state that made this happen. It's happening almost every month. You hear a new state enacting these new rules about wholesaling. And the problem has become where if you get a deal under contract, you need to close on it. And wouldn't it be nice if you had access to the funds to close on it? Now, when we do land, we normally get 90 days to close on the vacant lot. And we don't need a lot of money either. We just need 5, 10, 20 grand to close on these and own them free and clear. But for a lot of people getting started, they just don't have that money right now. But sometimes it used to be easier. Now it's gotten a lot harder, where you can actually, before we used to call realtors and we would call enough of them, we would find one that said, yeah, you can list it. I don't care if you don't own it yet. Just have the seller sign a power of attorney, a limited power of attorney, or some kind of turn it into a novation or something like that. But that's still even getting harder and harder. And so I've been telling people, you need to start digging your well before you're thirsty. You need to start getting private money so that you can actually close on these deals. And if you've got a good smoking hot deal, you can close on it and close on 15, 20, 30 days. Now you own it. Now turn around and sell it on the MLS, with a realtor, with a broker that has a ton of vacant land sold in the last 6 months, and then you can just make even more money. And then you pay your private investor a little bit of interest. Okay. So private money is becoming more and more important. I think one of the biggest reasons why, again, is so that you can actually take it down and not have to pay real expensive hard money fees and things like that. So you want to add anything to that? How important private money is?
Yeah, you mentioned something. A lot of people don't have the money. Even if I did have the money, I would probably go out and raise the money anyway. So instead of using your own money, most people don't account for the fact that they're using their own money early on. I have a lot of people that talk to me about, oh yeah, I use like $1 million of my own money. Well, you could do both. So it really is just arbitrage, looking at what could you make on your money and then what could you raise money at. So for years, I was raising money at 4 or 5% interest, which sounds crazy to another real estate investor. Like, who's going to want 4 or 5% interest? Well, the people who have their money in savings accounts or checking accounts or under their mattress or in CDs, and we didn't have 5.5% money market accounts like we have right now today, in the last 10 years or so. They've been making like nothing, 0.1, maybe 1% max on an online one that you have to jailbreak your money for like 5 days in advance, right? So I wouldn't use your own money. That's one thing that I would add, is figuring out, this is a skill that absolutely, if developed, you can be brought into almost any deal on the planet. Like, for some reason, people have such a block with raising money. They think it's so difficult. So if you can be the one to raise the money, you can be brought in on any deal you want, a multifamily deal, a single family deal, land development deals, land deals, flipping land, whatever. Like, if you can just start learning that skill, and over time you can develop the fact that, oh, this is somebody who can raise money. I want them on my team. And it just makes you so much more well-rounded and almost like first pick in the schoolyard of real estate. If you can figure out how to raise money, people want you on the team. That's one thing. I think the other thing that really blocks a lot of people is, how do I raise money if I don't have a deal? This is like the question that I get asked the most on the planet, is like, how do you do that? I don't have a deal. So why would I even start talking about money, or other people are interested in money? So I don't know if you want to go there, Joe, but that's like that's the question I get asked the most, is like,
oh, for sure.
What are your tips around that? Because a lot of new people, and even experienced people, who are like, well, I don't have a deal right now, so I'm going to get the deal, then I'm going to raise the money. That's backwards. So one thing that I do, the biggest tip that I can give you is, I'm always talking about money. So like, if you have money, I really think of myself as an unlicensed financial advisor, because the financial advisors are really like selling their own products. I'm providing somebody an opportunity to get involved in a real estate deal, either that I do or that somebody else does. But I'm going to educate you on what this world is like, because there's like a really confusing curtain between the people that have money and the people that have the skills. And everybody wants to keep it like really confusing. So neither one of them can kind of figure out what's going on. So I love to talk to people about where their money is, what they have going on with it. What are some of their goals? Why are they talking to me? And if you think about talking to a private money lender in the exact same way you would talk to a motivated seller, you're going to get really far ahead of where everybody else is. Everybody else is just like, oh, I can offer you 15% interest. Like that could scare away people. That scares away somebody who's getting 1% or 2% in the bank right now. So instead, if you can ask them, so when you walk into a seller's house or you're talking to them about their land deal and you're like, why don't you just sell this on the MLS? Right? It's like one of the first questions. Or why don't you this is a beautiful house. Why don't you just rent it out?
Yeah. Why do you even want to sell it?
Yeah. It's the exact same conversation with a lender is, well, where's your money now? And they're like, in the stock market. Well, why don't you just keep it in the stock market?
That's great.
Like, why are we even having this conversation? They came to me, right? They saw something that I put out there. They came to me talking to me about real estate and investing in real estate with me. And I'm like, well, why don't you just keep it in the stock market? Then they'll tell me every reason why they hate the stock market. And I said, oh, okay. It's literally the exact same script. But we lay down for our private money lenders. We just say, oh, whatever, I just need the money, whatever it is, because we've got the deal and we don't have the money. So instead, I have those conversations ahead of time. I try to figure out what they're looking for. And
how do you start that conversation, by the way?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that I do, and I'll tell you, I've tried to brand myself of somebody who is openly talking about money. So like if you come to a party or sit next to me, I'm probably going to ask you how much you make at some point in our conversation. I'm going to ask you what some of your goals are. Because you're going to tell me like, oh, I want to go on a vacation, but I can't. Or like, we can't afford it. We're saving up for this, or we're saving up for that. Or our kid, you'll say something along those lines. And I just find I'm a mentor and a coach, and I try to be a money mentor. And so how can I help you with some of that stuff? So one of the reasons why I built the YouTube channel, because I have a background in aviation. I love aviation. The majority of my money lenders are people from my history and my past, a lot of pilots. Yep. And airplanes and business is what I'm talking about on that channel. So what do you think airplanes and business have in common? Money. People are like, how did you make that money? How can you afford that airplane? How did you pay $2.7 million for the plane? How can you afford a $30,000 annual inspection? How do you, like, how? And it's real estate. Like, let me show you how I made this money. So I'm trying to build this brand around money. And it just happens to be something I love and could talk about every day, which is aviation and money and business. I could talk about that every day, all day. I love it. So if you find your thing and you find how to put that kind of information out there. So early on, I would just figure out how to tell stories. So marketing is just storytelling. Joe's taught you a lot about marketing on this show. I guarantee it. He's one of the best marketers I've ever met in my life. And so it's about storytelling. So what story can you tell? Did you just pay your taxes? Well, how much did you pay in your taxes? Can you help people with taxes so around tax time, I would say something like, man, I just did my taxes for my business and it's incredible. I looked and we paid our private money lenders in last year $250,000. I have a goal this year to pay my private money lenders $500,000. If you're interested in learning how to become a private money lender, or just if you're interested in learning more about how to invest in real estate, just hit me up. And it's not making an offer. It's not putting out that we pay 12% to our lenders. It's none of that stuff. It's just, hey, that's the story. And then if it's like, hey, we just flipped a house and our private money lenders made $1,827 or $5,928, then I'm going to put it up there. Hey, we just flipped this house. Everybody won. Even our private money lender made whatever. If you are ever interested in learning how you could do something like that, let me know. So I like to use social media a lot. I like to use social proof. I like to talk about it. And then what happens is somebody will refer somebody else. But in the beginning, you just have to become somebody that is like attracting money conversations. That's what I say.
And now somebody who's not done a deal before, they don't have the proof of concept already.
Yeah.
How do you suggest that they kind of go through that?
Great question. If you know somebody that just did a deal, that a private money lender, borrow that authority. borrow that story. Say, oh my gosh, you could do it right now. I just listened to this podcast and this guy raised $50 million of private money in the last 8 years. I've never heard anything like that. I didn't even know. Did you know that you can invest in real estate passively while you're not dealing with tenants and toilets and all those things? And, I can, let's have a conversation about it. Like you can borrow my authority. You can borrow Joe's. You can borrow the person that that did a deal. Like you could just tell us. I told a story about IRAs and 401ks. There's just so many different ways to do it. You got to borrow the stories before you own them. And I do want to get back to go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say the other thing is, you have all the resources. If you're in my inner circle area, you can JV with somebody on a deal first, and they will provide the money. Now you have a deal that you can talk about to your private investors, and you can talk about, we paid our private lender such and such amount of money on this deal that we did, right? So if don't feel like, I know it's important to raise your private money starting now, but at the same time, there are resources that you can use, hard money, transactional 1 or 2 day transactional funding. You could use a funding company in the land space. You can JV with me on a deal or something like that. But then once you get those, like one deal under your belt, now you have something that you can start talking about to your private investors. But like, this is way easier than you guys think. Don't get all wrapped up in your head, freaked out about this, because I think what Bill's saying here, which is so good, just talk about what you do. Or talk about what you're wanting to do. And if you're already hopefully starting to do marketing, you're already starting to get leads, you're already starting to make offers, you can talk about these deals that you're working on and talk about it how, hey, I got this deal we're working on. It's going to be a great deal. We're going to be buying it for this. We're going to be selling it for this. Conservatively, we're going to be buying it for 25. It's worth 50. And we're going to be flipping it and making a $15,000 profit. We'll probably pay our private investor, $2 or $3 grand. It's going to be an amazing deal. And if you just talk about this deal that you're doing, they're going to naturally ask you questions about it. They're going to actually say, well, tell me a little bit more about how that works. You know what I mean? It's good.
You said like, there's so much to unpack on this show. The first piece is I didn't start raising money. You mentioned JVs. I did 50-50 deals with a guy in California that had a couple $1 million that I met inside Justin Williams' mastermind, inside 7-Figure Flipping. Yeah. And he financed every single house that I bought at the courthouse steps. So we did like 6 deals together in the very beginning because I didn't have this skill. And then I realized that I love talking about money. I've always really enjoyed talking about money. I'm like obsessively interested in money. And then I was like, this is way too expensive. I'm giving away $20,000 every deal. I make 40K. I'm giving away 20. And it was just because I was trying to share the risk with someone else. And so I was like, hey, I started raising money. I raised money for one. And I was like, whoa, this is like a lot easier than, and I have to give away way less. I was giving away like 4 or 5K in interest instead of, and the other thing is my private money lenders were so happy. They were so excited that they got to participate. And the cool thing is they're watching HGTV shows saying they're flipping houses when they're sitting at home doing nothing, but they're involved and they feel like they're part of the crew. And so they want to do that kind of passive investing where they feel like they're flipping houses. So that 50-50 JV is like we talked about, but I didn't start doing this from the very beginning. I just want people to know that this was took years for me to build up, but I think you can go so much faster, hopefully with this just frame of mind of you're not asking for money. Like I wasn't asking for a loan. I never ask for loans.
Right, exactly.
I am providing somebody with an opportunity that's better than the vehicle that they're in. So they're currently in the stock.
You're making them approach you.
Yes.
You're not chasing them.
For sure. It's very much like I'm putting out some ideas, some concepts, and over time, they like, you know what? I should talk to him about that. You know what? I need to talk to him, and it's same thing. They get a little more motivated. They're just motivated sellers with their money. Like they get broken down in the stock market. They get broken down with a bad investment. They get broken down with financial advisors charging them massive fees, and it's all confusing. It's like, let's just make it super simple. Like just come in here and this is what we do. We show them some great returns. And next thing you know, it's more and more and more. And so the next piece, the other thing is it's very easy for me to sit on here and say, oh, like Just take more action, go do this stuff. A lot of it is your relationship with money from when you were younger. So it's all the things that you're carrying around about money. So if you're like, you know what, like I've made bad investments in the past, why would anybody invest with me? Then you're not going to go out there and be confident in your money raising and your conversations, those kind of things. So what I always try to teach people to do is lean on the success that you've had in other areas. So what I realized was I ran projects for the government as a test pilot that were like hundreds of millions of dollars. And I managed the government contracts, the government resources. So they're like, I haven't done a deal before. How do I have credibility? Well, what have you done in the past that you can borrow credibility from for this as well? So if you were a really successful nurse, as an example, you're like a nurse instructor. You're not going to go to somebody who doesn't know you that's like, I want to give you money, because you have no credibility with them. Right, but if you can go back and lean on the people that are already in your circle, and that's why most people are like, I don't want to raise money from friends and family. It's like, well, too bad. Like that's the beginning of where you get started. I highly encourage you to do that. And it's not about borrowing their money. It's like Joe said, you're a partner. Like you're partnering up on these deals. They're your money partner. And you have trust. You have to have enough trust for them to make a decision to invest in a project that you have and have the confidence that you're going to do well with it. And so what you need to do is think back to all the success that you've had in your life in all of these areas and say, okay, I can transfer that success to a new vehicle, a new area, to real estate, to land, to houses, whatever it is. And then who do I have that would be interested in participating in the upside of this, because it's going to be big for both of us. And so that's kind of where I started, was very much, I looked at all the different networks that I had, people from high school, people from college, people from sports teams that I played on, people from the military, and, anybody in those areas, my fraternity brothers, the soccer team at Georgia Tech that I played on. It's like, who already knows me and trusts me, especially the military guys. Military guys are like, this guy flew me around and we were risking our lives together. I'm sure he can handle a little bit of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, you brought up a really good point there too. I hope you guys caught it. You talked about partnering with JV with somebody from a Facebook group or from a community that you're in, right? Yep. So there's a lot of really good communities out there. If you are not in one, join one right now. Like there's Facebook groups, there's different kind of programs or platforms out there. And when you can start partnering with like-minded people and be known in the community as a go-giver, as somebody who is willing to share and help and invest in people and, roll up your sleeves and start, and you're doing the work, you start talking about some of the deals that you're looking at, you're going to potentially find people there to partner. Now we'll talk about this in a minute. You can't solicit private money. You can't just go out there and say, hey, I'll pay somebody 12% of my whatever. But there are certain ways that you can JV on deals with people, right? And then your part of the JV is to find the deal and sell the deal. And then the other person's part of the JV could be providing the money, providing the expertise, the contracts, the title company, the buyers, maybe even things like that. So, and a lot of times too, these JVs know the private investors that they can bring in for the deal. So especially when you're getting started, I just want to say, get involved in a local community like my inner circle. Bill's got one too. There's some other ones on Facebook, but like get involved in those local communities. And that's a great place to start. Then when you've got a deal or two under your belt, all the while you're talking about these deals that you're doing to people that people that you're meeting, then you can start, building a database of people that would be interested in investing in deals with you. And then now, we haven't talked about this yet, but like when you're talking to people, it's more like, I love how you're talking to them like a seller. You're asking them questions. You're getting them to qualify, or you're qualifying them, not them qualifying you. And so you can tell them, listen, if I got a deal, I don't know if you'll be a good fit, or I don't know if this will be, I'm trying to phrase it so that you're not chasing them. But like, maybe if I got a deal, it might be something that would work for both of us. And that's how you can kind of position it. And then when you get a deal, you can email it and say, hey, listen, here's a potential deal. If you're not interested, that's fine. I've got 20 other people that are interested in it. Just give me a yes or no by the end of the day, if you don't mind, and present them the facts about the details. But that's kind of what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And that brings it full circle to the first, like how we set up this whole thing. How do you get money when you have no deal? And the thing I do exactly like you just said, Joe. I get to the point where in that conversation, I'm like, where's your money now? What are some of the things that you're looking to do? I basically build a bridge from, where they are to where they want to be. What are some of your goals? What are your plans? What are you looking for? I look and see if they're looking for cash flow, like a monthly payment, or are they fine doing a balloon like at the end of my project where I don't have to make monthly payments? I say, hey, what interest rate would you be excited about?
Yeah.
And then I get to a point where, well, if I did have a deal, about how much do you think you'd be comfortable investing in it? And then usually I'll get a question like, well, I have no idea. How much are these? And then that's when I'll say, well, on average, projects in my area are usually about 150,000. And then I just shut up. And they're like, whoa, 150,000. Like, I was only thinking like 25,000. And then I'll say, oh, okay. 25,000. Is that what you would be comfortable moving over? They're like, well, maybe up to 50. So now I know an interest rate, I know 50,000, I know all this stuff, right? And all of that is going on my CRM for me, it was a spreadsheet. It was an Excel spreadsheet, still is actually in my, like if I'm having these conversations, goes on a spreadsheet. Now I just built a CRM for me. But you guys, it's not that hard. And at that point now I say, okay, this is how I get the interest rate down. So here's my like gold nugget at the end of the show. So if you're still here, great. So then I say, okay, if they say 8%, I say, okay, so now I know how much money they have. I also want to know how quickly they can move it. So about how long do you think it would take for you to, get the money? Because sometimes, in the brokerage accounts, you have to sell stock and things like that. And they're like, oh, I can move it pretty quickly, 2 or 3 days. Or it might be like, oh, I was thinking about my IRA, rolling it over in self-directed IRA. That takes like 4 or 5 weeks. And so now I know all of these things. And I say, well, I know you said 8% interest rate. And so I have a sheet where I just put everybody in a list, and the people that have the lowest interest rate, I call them first. And I just go down the list to the highest interest rate. So if somebody says, if that person said they want 15%, I said, I can absolutely do 15%, but you're going to be at the bottom of my list. And usually what they say is, well, what would it take to move me up your list? And then I'll say, well, I mean, if you're at 6%, I use your money every day of the week. It'll never be idle. And they say, oh, okay, well, yeah, I think, 15% is pretty crazy. I could probably do like 7 or 8. And so I'm just using that to try to move them up the list. And this is how I get their interest rate down without me saying I can't pay that. I say yes to everything. I say, oh, I can absolutely, I can probably figure out a way to put that to work. I could probably figure out a way to make that work. Because look, if you have nobody on the list, 15% might be the person that you're calling. And so I'm just constantly trying to update that. And I know that they're not, even what they said is not always what I'm going to get. But that's the first person I call. The person is at 4%, 5%, 6%. I just go down the list. Hey, I got a deal. And so now you have all that. So when you have a deal, you can actually look at this list and say, all right, this person's got 50K. This person's got 100. This person's got 75. And this is how you can build a database of people before you have a deal. And say, you know what? I'm exactly like Joe said, I'm looking for a deal. This is what I'm looking for. Would you be interested in working with me when I find it? And then you call them up, and it could be, stay in touch every couple of weeks, but a month later you find a deal, you call them up and, hey, we had that conversation. I got a deal now. And it might be, I already put that money to work, or I've been waiting for you to call. But that's how you get the interest rate down, move them up the list, because that's like an auction mentality. They're like, move me up the list. I dropped a guy from like 14% to 7% in that one question.
I love it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about social media. And this is something that you talk about in the course that you guys can get for free at joemccall.com/cashflow. That gives you to a $1 trial of my Inner Circle program, joemccall.com/cashflow. You get Bill's free course on raising private money in there. But talk about the social media stuff. Give us some examples, Bill, of how you talk about this on social media.
Yeah, there's a few things. And look, I'm not an SEC attorney. There are some securities. I don't want to scare you at all. But there's some things that I don't say. Like Joe said earlier, and we talked about earlier, I don't make an offer. It's not, hey, I have a house. I just got under contract. I need $150,000. I'm willing to pay 10%. Like that's a total offer. That's a total like issue right there. I like to talk about historic. And if you talk to 10 securities attorneys, you're going to probably get 8 to 10 different answers.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yep.
I've talked to a lot of them about this, and resoundingly, I can typically talk about past results. So something that has already happened. So I can say something like, I love this, hey, we just flipped a house and my private money lender made X. I don't like to say the word guaranteed because nothing's guaranteed. So this is something that I stay away from big time. Like you can a guaranteed rate, a guaranteed return. I see people do this all over social media all the time. I try to talk about, if I want to say something, I might say a fixed return and not say what it is. Like, I usually say you can get a fixed return investing in real estate. If you're ever curious what it looks like to partner with us, send me a message. If you want to become one of my money lending partners, like, 15 other people, it's very much just like, if you're curious about this and you want to talk, let me know.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, we're not chatting in the comments. Just like, send me a message. And every time I post one of those, I'll get one or two people that'll just send me a message and want to talk. And sometimes it's somebody who's like, oh, I thought it was going to be a partner. Like we'd be 50-50. I want to be your 50-50 partner. Like, no, man, I was like looking for private money lenders and not for you. But it's always going to attract, you want to start a conversation. The goal of that post is to create curiosity, not give them all the answers. You want to give them, you want to talk to them on the phone. Just like you're not saying, hey, I'm buying houses at 50 cents on the dollar. Who wants to sell it to me? Like, you would never say that. Who's going to answer that post? Like, oh, I want half off my house. No, it's like we buy houses cash. No, we pay all the closing costs, no realtor fees, all this stuff, all the benefits, right? So I want to provide that to have the conversation. So I don't like to say guaranteed. I like fixed is a good way of saying it. I like to compare fixed returns versus variable returns. So a variable return in the stock market side by side with a fixed return, you could anywhere, but a fixed 8% is going to destroy a variable 8% every day of the week. Like, unless you had so much money that you were made in the first year, like a fixed return will always crush it. I like to throw rocks at expense ratios. I like to throw rocks at financial advisors that charge that keep percentages of everything that they do. Assets under management are so important. Like for us, we're like, I don't make any fees on top of their money. So even if they're making 8% in the stock market, there might be a 2% expense ratio and 1% for the advisor. They're making 5%. They don't even know that. So I'm trying to uncover all the corruptness of the stock market. And that's just like my strategy of how to bring people into real estate to have a conversation with me. And they're just like, oh, I never knew that. Tell me more. Let's get on a call. I like to say, yeah, please.
Can I ask you like a typical land deal, for example? It's worth 50 grand. We have it under contract to buy it for 25 grand. Okay. We might but we want to close on it in 30 days and it might take us another 60 days to sell it. So we only need the money for 2 to 3 months.
Yep.
We're going to borrow 25 grand. So that in private investors protected at about 50% loan to value, which is pretty safe. And I like for vacant land to be, at least 50% loan to value. With a house, for various reasons, I don't want to be any more than maybe 75, 80%, depending on the amount of work that needs to be done on a house. But with vacant land, I want a bigger margin there. Okay, so what would be some terms that you would, if you needed to raise that private money for that land deal, what kind of terms would you offer to the private investor?
Okay, so before I start, there's one thing that you said. There's a word that you said in there that was like a trigger word for me. You said safe. So I don't ever say safe either on the phone or on my posts or anything like that because I don't like that word. You could say secured. So it's secured to the land at 50% value and let them determine if that's safe for them or not.
Yeah, great point. Great catch.
So yeah, there's a few things. Safe is one that I was going to hit. So, okay, your question, what terms would I offer? So I think the question that you just gave me is backwards thinking. It's what 99% of the real estate investors think about a deal like this. What terms can I offer? So what I would create is I'd say, what can I pay? So first thing that I would do is I would sit down and look at that deal and say, what's the max that I could pay? And then I would I don't even make an offer. It's like walking into a seller's house and making an offer on it before you have a conversation. Like I don't design the offer for the real estate deal for the private money lender until I find out what their pain points are and problems are. Because if I'm talking to somebody that needs cash flow, if I can't provide them the monthly cash flow for it, if it's an older person who's using this as like an annuity or retirement or in addition to their Social Security or something, and I can't provide a monthly payment for them, then I can't even make them an offer, right? And if it's somebody, if I want to balloon it, so I would look at this deal to understand the exit strategy of it. So I'm going to hold it for 60 days and flip it. I might not want to make a monthly payment, or maybe what I would do is I would overraise for the deal. I'd raise 30K and then make a monthly payment to them potentially, because now I'm still at, 60% loan to value. Feel comfortable with that. If they're comfortable with that, that's security. Now I can use some of that to make their payment each month where I don't have any out-of-pocket expenses. And then I would figure out maybe I could guarantee. There's just so many options. So I want to make it really simple for the people that are listening though. You could pay on a balloon, which means at the end when you sell it, and I would get a term long enough where this person I'm talking to, what if I have to hold this for a year? I don't want to tell them I'm going to sell it in 60 days if I'm not sure. So I always like longer term than what I think I need. And then I always like to get the interest rate down as low as possible with as little money out of pocket as possible. So I'd always prefer to balloon on this. I'd always like a longer runway than I need. And I'd like the lowest interest. So a balloon means I don't have to make payments every month. It comes out of my proceeds at the end. And then I want as low an interest as I could get. And then if they push back on something like that, but I'm going to give you 25,000 and it's 6% interest. I'm only going to make a couple $100 or $1,000. I'd be like, well, how would it be if I guaranteed 90 days of interest, even if I sell it in 2 weeks? How does that sound? And as long as my deal can afford it, then I'm just trying to figure out what the deal can afford. So I find out what the deal can afford, and then I try to get it as cheap as possible under that.
That's a good point. Does that make sense? And one of the things you guys got to remember too is when you're looking at paying an interest rate to a seller, when you're talking dollars and cents, there's not much difference between maybe 8% and 12%, or maybe even 8% and 15%. But try to get from the seller what they want first. It's just like talking and negotiating.
The lender, you're talking about the lender. Yeah. With the lender, it's, and Joe's exactly right. Like the numbers, I have so many people that have I have a guy that has $3 million that one guy has with him at 10% interest. And he's like, man, if I could get that down to 8%, it would be so great. And I was like, dude, just go find another deal. Go find 2 more deals. Don't rock the boat on your $3 million lender just to knock him down 2 interest rate points. Do the math. The amount of time that if he says no and he gets upset and pulls his money, how much more it would take for you to go raise that. I'm usually giving people more money over time. I'm usually increasing their rates because I'm getting more efficient and I'm getting better as an investor. And so I remember I had a bunch of money at 5%. And the next year I was like, man, I feel comfortable doing this. I got to bump them up to 6. And so we've had to adjust our rates. We sell on owner financing in Kentucky. So I have to raise a couple $1 million for those houses. You mentioned we're about 80% after repair value to value. We overraise for some of those deals, but still keep people where they're comfortable. And then we pay ourselves on the purchase, we pay ourselves on the delta, and then we pay ourselves on the down payment. So it's very similar to land. What you guys are doing is buying it and then potentially owner financing it on the back, right? Where you make money when you buy it, you make money when you sell it on a down payment, and then you make the spread between what you're paying to the investor potentially and what you're making. So
I love that strategy you're talking about. It's one of if I was going to invest in homes, that's one of my favorites, is to use private money to buy the house and then sell it on seller financing.
Yep.
So can you just talk briefly about what kind of house you typically do that?
Yeah.
in?
So we do this in Kentucky. And if you're a wholesaler in Kentucky, like Bowling Green area, southeast Kentucky, we're even going a little bit into Louisville. I could pay more than a flipper. I can pay more than a landlord. I can typically pay more than just about anybody because we fix it up and sell it on. We basically flip the house to ourselves. So we buy it, we fix it up, and then we sell it on seller financing on a lease option. So and Joe,
so you sell it on. Okay, that's interesting because I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
You do fix the property up.
We fix the property up like we were reselling it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I fully renovate it. We have a team there. We basically flip it. It's not like, but yeah, we make it really nice, and we make sure everything is, if it needs to be replaced, it gets replaced then. So if it's an HVAC unit or a new roof that we need to put on it, we do that. So, it's almost like a turnkey rental.
Why even sell it on a lease option? Why not just sell it owner financing right from the beginning?
Well, there's a couple reasons. One is there's some Dodd-Frank stuff that if you sell them, you get RMLO, which is doable. It's not really a big deal, but really the downside is any foreclosure process. So like they get the deed right away, where I don't want them to get the deed right away most of the time. I've done this in Florida quite a few times. I had to foreclose on one, even on a land contract. I've had some challenges with some of the foreclosures. And so I just rather them earn their deed over time. And so it opens us up to some of the mechanical issues that we like, larger ticket items, but if they're going to break, we should have fixed them in the first place anyway. It's budgeted for that. And so,
so you'll do a lease option for how many years?
That's a great question for my partner. I raise the money and he does the contract work.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I want to ask you some more questions about raising private money again here real quick. I think everything we've been talking about so far has been one investor, one deal, right? You don't pool money together.
Yeah.
Right? Talk about that a little bit. And when do you start actually creating a special fund and registering it with the SEC?
Yeah. So I just want to be careful about some of this stuff. There's some, one thing I would look into is blue sky law, which is like the amount of money that you're bringing in to, like, if you got a ton of like unsecured and secured money and lots of different loans, just needing a security or a license or a fund like Joe talked about. So that's something to look into. I don't want to give a bunch of legal advice on the show, but something to watch out for. What I like is, and it's not necessarily have to be one investor. Sometimes we'll have a first and a second position mortgage. But the biggest advice I can give to you, and something that I think a lot of people mess up, me included, early on, is taking a bunch of like unsecured money. And what I mean is just money on a promissory note is basically like an IOU that's not secured to the property with a mortgage, because you're saving money. You'll save some money on like the mortgage taxes and then some of the documents and things like that. However, it's so much easier to account in your business if something is attached to a property than if you're just raising money unsecured to come into your operating account and then like almost like just earmarking it for certain projects. So I would just encourage you to be careful. I've had a lot of people that I've coached over the years that haven't understood how much equity they have in their business, like how much actual room they have in their business, because they're taking on a lot of unsecured money that's being mixed in with operating account money. It's just, it's a bad practice. Yeah, a really good way to do it. And some people that, if you want to go to the biggest extremes, it's set up an individual bank account for each project that you do. I have a couple clients that do that, where all the money goes there. So that's something to think about. As far as when to create a fund, if you're raising I still don't have a fund. I really raise for individual projects. And then on our big multifamily, like we have a deal we just had to raise 13 million for, and we have another one that's 14 million coming up in May. These are individual syndications. So we create a syndication for that project and we raise money into the project. What I like about not having a fund personally is that there's not a lot of idle money all the time that's making a return.
Interest on idle money.
Yeah, depending on how you set up the fund, and then the funds need to be opened and closed and things like that. So there's just a lot of management that comes into it. I'm always big on liability, tax burden, and then brain damage. So there's a brain damage factor that I put on a lot of this stuff. That's just amount of work that comes into it, like having 150 different LLCs to protect 150 different properties. I'm like, that's a lot of tax returns and brain damage, and it just seems like a lot for me. I'd rather protect myself. If it's liability that I'm worried about, let me see some other ways to figure out how to protect myself against liability versus having 150 LLCs to manage and renew every year and create returns for, especially if they're partnerships and not flow through. So things like that. I would just encourage everybody, when you get to that point, I would seek some legal counsel for it. But in the beginning, when you're just raising some money, I think individual onesie twosies. I don't like pooling money together. I don't like, if they're going to do that, they can go create their own LLC and then invest with me. So if you and 3 friends want to bring money to the same deal, you guys go ahead and create an LLC that you manage and then bring it to my deal. Or, because the smaller amounts of money you can use for gap funding. You can put a second position on the deal if you need to. You can put a second, a third. You can kind of stack money that way, but I always want it to be secured and attached to a property typically.
Good. Let's talk real quick because you're going over our limit here, and I appreciate your time, Bill. Yeah. Few questions though, real quick as we wrap this up. Some big mistakes to avoid. One of the things that I like to talk about is always have your private investors send the money to the title company, who prepares the promissory note and the secures it with the deed of trust and all of that, right? Any other tips you want to talk about to mistakes to avoid?
Yeah, don't look at your private money lenders just like you would a partner. So don't take on somebody just because they have money. Like if they're annoying or they need updates every single day, all the time, giving you a hard time, putting pressure on it, like interview them like you would a team member, because they are. And communicate. One of the biggest things I find is we don't communicate nearly enough like they're on the team. And that's a really important part of it. When things are going well and things are not going so well, be transparent, communicate with them. I totally agree with sending the money to the title company and drafting up really good documentation and staying on top of that, even if you need to hire a VA or somebody to help you with that.
Good. Good. Any other mistakes?
Yeah, fire bad private money lenders. Fire them if they're not good. Like, get rid of them. And I would say the biggest mistake that I see is just people waiting. You wait too long to start raising money. Like, you got to really get ahead of it and communicate to your people even when you don't have a deal. This is a mistake I made recently. We were doing a lot of deals in 2024. I think that's the year it is right now. In 2023, I went 9 months without doing a multifamily deal. And so I wasn't raising money and I wasn't talking to my audience. I wasn't talking to my list. And so they put money elsewhere. The people who had money, they were putting it in other deals, not ours. And had I been talking to them, it was really hard to start up that machine again and start talking about raising money and coming back into that conversation with them. So I highly encourage you to not fall off of that and just be consistent. Even when you think nobody's listening, just be consistent, because they're watching. It might take 3, 4, 5, 10 posts before they're like, okay, I want to talk to this person. But the early indications of interest does not indicate how many people are watching. And then the last thing I'll share, if you do my challenge that Joe has in his inner circle, it's called the 500K challenge. If you do this, it's gonna have you give you some homework. Yeah. When you make a video and people watch a video and you only 50 people watch the video, or 100 people watch the video, and you were like, thousands of people should be watching this, like nobody's watching. Well, I just want you to reframe the thinking. If you create that video and 50 people watch, I'm like this on YouTube right now. I got a YouTube video we just launched, has 125 views. I'm like, why are more people not watching this? But if I thought if 125 people were in my office right now, and I was giving them that 8-minute message, I would be ecstatic. Yeah. So just change the frame a little bit. That if 50 people were watching a live presentation from you, you would probably love it because you're just getting started. And so just 50 people on a video is a ton of people. Yeah. Like if they were in your office, it would be like the whole first 4 rows of my auditorium that I have here. And so I would give that presentation to them. Point. And so hopefully that encourages you to keep going, because so many people are like, oh, this guy gets 10 million views. This guy gets 100,000 views. And so right now, like that video I just made for kids on how they can make $1 million. I'm like, if I had 125 kids in my studio right now, I would love it. I would be so pumped up. And so I got 125 people to watch that 8-minute video that if they were in person, I'd be a lot happier. So change the way you look at it and you'll think you're having a lot more progress. And you are. 50 people, that's a lot. 20 people, that's a lot. 10 people, that's a lot.
To wrap this up, I always like to say too, when you are raising private money, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, Bill, is make sure they get paid first. Make sure your private investors get paid before you do. That is so important. I've had deals go bad where I lost money, but my private investors always got paid back their investment back. I may not have given it back to them as soon as they originally hoped for, but I got them all their capital back plus interest. So it's really important that you understand that with your private investors and you go into that knowing that. And yeah, you can have what's the word for it? Not personally
Non-recourse.
responsible or whatever. Huh?
Not non-recourse.
Yes, you can have non-recourse loan, but that's not how we do business here, right?
Yep.
And I believe that if you really do want to operate with integrity and be able to sleep at night, you need to make sure that you take care of your private investors first. They get paid first out of the profits. And if there's anything left, that's what you get. And even if it means you lose money, you have to make sure you get their money back first. And I think if you operate under that principle, you'll do well, and your private investors will do well, and you'll only be taking on good deals. You're putting yourself on the line as well. Man,
that's the best point. That's the best point to end on. I lost $70,000 on a house in Pensacola, Florida, and my private investors had no idea. They made $30K, so $30K of that was, I could have lost 40, and called them up and said, "Hey, I lost money on this deal. What can you do?" I didn't say anything to them. I talk about it in my book. It's the best decision that I ever made. Those people have invested millions of dollars with me going forward.
And they'll tell their friends.
For sure. And they didn't even know. They might still not know unless they read my book.
Yeah. What is this book that you have?
It's called 7-Figure Flipping Underground. Yeah.
7-Figure Flipping Underground. Do you have a website they can go to get that, or?
Yeah, 7ffbook.com. Yeah, I pay you to send the book. It's a free plus shipping book, so it's like $8.
Okay. Yeah. 7ffbook.com.
Yep.
Nice. So go check that out. We'll put that link in the description of this video or audio podcast as well. Good way to reach out to you, Bill. Instagram, YouTube's.
Yeah, Instagram and YouTube at Bill Allen REI. But don't go buy that book and wait. Like, do not wait. Like, you don't need to read the book. Like, go do the thing that you want to do. So many times we Joe puts the link in the description. I'm going to buy that book. It's going to get here in 2 weeks. That was my problem in the beginning. I had the library card. I was waiting weeks to get the book. Like, you have the information from Joe's podcast. Go do it. So, at Bill Allen REI on Instagram and YouTube. And I have a podcast called 7-Figure Flipping.
Very good. Thank you, Bill, for being on the show. Really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll see you guys later.